Hello, and thank you for joining another installment of the Smittcamp Family Honors College Fireside Chats. I am excited to have with you today Chris McComb joining us. And a little bit of Chris, thank you for being here. And a little bit of background on Chris. So Chris grew up in Pinehurst, California, which is just outside the Kings Canyon National Park. He went to Reedley High School and graduated from Fresno State in 2012 with a double major in civil and mechanical engineering. After that, he went on to attend Carnegie Mellon University as a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow, where he obtained his Master's of Science and Ph.D. in mechanical engineering and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in engineering design. He is currently an associate professor in Carnegie Mellon University's Department of Mechanical Engineering. There, he leads a research lab that focuses on design cognition, engineering design, human AI collaboration, and STEM education. His research is supported by the National Science Foundation, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and private corporations. So, quite impressive background, very technical. I am excited to have you. So, Chris, thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really happy to join you.
So let's start with a little bit about your background. So you grew up, it sounds like, in a smaller community.
Yeah,
can you
about
share a
100
little
people.
bit? Say that again?
Yeah, about 100 people, so pretty small.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was, and growing up in a small town like that, it's really a family feel, right? It really brings life to the saying of it takes a village, right? Yeah, very closely connected to many people in the community and still am today. Going home to visit my parents, they're always like, "Oh, Chris is home. Let's, drive him around and let's see all the other people who are part of this, this broader community, this broader family." And I think that, sort of colored and tinged my experiences at Fresno State, of course.
Yeah, and as you say that, I grew up I went to a smaller agricultural community elementary school, and and there's so much pride that the general community has, right, to see other success, because it was a village, right? Like, it's the communal aspect. So
Yeah.
that's really cool that you've had that experience.
Yeah, I imagine that, many of the scholars in Smittcamp have a similar experience, right? Smaller communities, smaller agricultural communities are all over the Central Valley. Um, this is probably something that we share with a lot of other folks.
Right. Yeah. So how did you choose the Honors College at Fresno State?
Yeah, so first of all, I got my letter and I breathed a huge sigh of relief. Actually, I probably screamed and then breathed a sigh of relief. Because, initially for me and for my family, it was financial. I was just excited that I had, a golden ticket in hand. But then, when I visited Fresno State and started to meet some of the staff in the Honors College, started to meet some other students, it started to feel a little bit like Pinehurst, right? So it was very close knit, very tight. In talking to the staff in the Honors College, it was a group of people who, really deeply, truly cared about seeing everybody in the family or everybody in the Honors College succeed. So it was that family feeling that really sealed the deal for me.
Yeah. And so I was a student assistant when I was a student at Fresno State in the Honors College. So yeah, I do remember, and I think that was really such a nice communal feel within the Honors College, where we all knew each other's names. So while we were one amongst, 20, 25,000 students, we had this place we could go where, we had these relationships and people who wanted us to succeed. So yeah, I think that's definitely like one of the unique aspects about the program.
Oh, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about your experience while at Fresno State. Now, did you choose to live in the dorms when you went to school there?
Yep. So I lived in the dorms for 4 years. Yeah.
Great. And because I lived in the dorms for the first 3 years. And yeah, that was just such a good experience to, again, have that community, that sense of community on the campus there. because it is
It's a
largely a
different
commuter
community, right? A different circle. Because, I think I had a handful of Smittcamp folks on the same floor as me, but that's everybody else. Different colleges, different majors, people from different walks of life, right? I think that one of the really exciting things for me at Fresno State, apologies, Fresno State was always the fact that there were lots of what we call in higher education non-traditional students, right? So it's people who have maybe had a couple kids and are coming back to school. It's veterans, right? It's people from that aren't 20 years old and fresh out of high school. So that was really fun to get to know and get to meet a lot of those people through the dorms.
Yeah, and when I was there, I remember we called them reentry students.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I did find that they really enriched the academic programs as well, because they just had so many more life experiences, and so we're able to draw on those in class. I remember so I'm an accounting major. So it was a cost accounting class, and we were talking about, I think, travel trailers, and people were talking about what different features you'd want in your Winnebago. And I, really hadn't had exposure to that at all. And so it was something, and, and even there were other examples throughout the class, but having, people who with real world experience of either using different services or just knowledge of the broader world, just, I think, brought more than what would typically get.
In engineering, I mean, having people come in with those broader world experiences, right? Or in some cases, we had folks who had, worked as machinists or in sort of engineering adjacent industries, and they just had fantastic insights.
Yeah. So what is your favorite memory from your time at Fresno State?
So when I first started off at Fresno State, I was a civil engineering major. And first semester, first year, something like that, civil engineering students take a course called CE 85, which is Intro to Civil Engineering. And one of the big assignments in that course, at least it used to be, one of the big assignments was to build essentially a popsicle stick bridge, right? And then we'd take it into the lab and crush it with this big machine and see how much weight it held, right? And our bridge failed miserably. But that, I think, that's a core memory for me, and probably my favorite memory, because it was the first real engineering thing that I'd done. And it was the first time I got to go into the lab and break stuff, right? So that sort of, I think that solidified my engineering identity early on.
Yeah, no, that's great. And as you described that, my children are big fans of Lego Masters on TV. And, that's different aspects of the competitions will involve, engineering essentially. So yeah, I could see that would be a really cool experience, especially as a student. Because in the classroom, so much is theory, and I think that's something unique to Fresno State, as well as there is a lot of labs and it's a big teaching university. So quite a bit of hands-on experience for students.
Yeah, lots of hands-on. I know in the College of Engineering at Fresno State, there's always a push to do more research. But I think what's unique is that a lot of professors, because of this, strong teaching mission, end up bringing some of that research into the classroom, right? They find ways to tie it closely with what they're teaching.
Yes. So let's see, then moving on, as you look back at your university experience, how do you think the Honors College has allowed you to expand your horizons and, kind of change your life trajectory, if you will?
Yeah, so I think that, the way that the college or the Honors College helped to just broaden my perspectives, expand my horizons, comes down to the fact that, when you start in the Honors College, you're part of a cohort. And that cohort, in my case, was not all engineers, right? And I formed really great relationships with everybody, and just being able to, relate to people who were getting degrees in other stuff, I think helped broaden my awareness and broaden my ability to just, talk across boundaries and to talk across disciplines. So I think just by the fact that we were all in the same cohort and we were all doing stuff together and, learning in parallel, so to speak, really, really helped me. In terms of how it's affected my life trajectory, I mean, like I mentioned, when I got the Smittcamp acceptance letter, I was overjoyed because my financial worries were no more. Um, and I think that if I hadn't gotten Smittcamp, if I hadn't come to Fresno State, my life trajectory would have looked different. And I don't think I would have found the passion for education, the passion for research that has led me to become a professor.
And as you look back, anything you would have done differently?
So, knowing what I know now, right? Knowing that I wound up in an academic field, I think I would have tried to do more like interdisciplinary research early on. Right? I mentioned that like working with an honors cohort sort of helped me develop an ability to talk across disciplines. And given that I do a lot of interdisciplinary research now, I think it would have been great to get started on that earlier. It's hard to find these interdisciplinary opportunities sometimes, but that's something that I think there are in spades at Fresno State. But I think that even beyond just research, right, doing a multidisciplinary project is super helpful for students who are planning to go into industry as well.
And I think, the honors curriculum is, and of course it does satisfy the general education requirements, but to your point, I remember so when I was there, we took a humanities course and also Armenian art. And I remember, and humanities was required the first semester at Fresno State. And I remember I had to look up in a dictionary and be like, okay, what is this that I'm reading? Like, what does humanities mean?
Yeah.
And, so if I was just signing up for courses on my own, I likely would not have chosen that, right? I would have picked something that was more like, name recognition of what I would have, been familiar with prior to. So I think that's, from my experience at least, it exposes us to things that we wouldn't probably have chosen. And those are really enriching.
That's a great point. Yeah, the undergrad honors curriculum is just, from being an engineer, I can say it's designed well, right? It's designed, it's a little more prescribed, right? Not as much flexibility, but that prescription really does, stretch the students in interesting ways.
And some people have referred to it as being like a small liberal arts college within the big university. And so it does give us that bit of a feel. All right, so, and then let's talk a little bit about your major. How did you select, and I mean, especially doing the double major, that's quite an undertaking.
Yeah, so when I first got to Fresno State, I think I was admitted with an environmental science major. And then, at some point over the summer before I got there in the fall, I started to, think a little more critically about my major, and I realized that environmental science is phenomenal, right? But one thing I really wanted to be doing was, building stuff and making things and creating solutions, as opposed to, focusing on studying and understanding phenomena in nature. So that's what drew me to engineering. And the closest thing that Fresno State had at the time to environmental science or environmental engineering was civil engineering. So I went there first, and I got really interested in just building big things, right? Huge skyscrapers, huge bridges that would have, a large impact on the world. But then after some time, as I started to learn more in a few honors classes, right, learning about issues of sustainability and energy, that drove me to think a little bit more about an engineering discipline that could help me solve some of those issues in the world, which is what drove me over to mechanical engineering. But by that point, I'd completed a good amount of my civil degree, so I decided to stay the course and finish both of them.
And did you graduate in 4 years, or how long did you?
I ended up taking a fifth year.
Well, that's understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. It took a little bit of extra time.
Yeah. But, And I mean, I think that's where that's probably, part of the scholarship allows for a bit more flexibility where, I know quite a few people who have studied abroad or done additional majors because there's just not quite the same financial pressure as there would be otherwise.
Oh yeah, I want to take back my earlier answer. If there's anything I would have done differently, I think I would have studied abroad.
Same,
Did you
yeah.
have a chance to do that?
I looked into it, but ultimately, and I'm a very um, achievement focused individual. So unfortunately, I was too obsessed with making sure I get done in 4 years. And the coursework available abroad was not going to fit in. And so I did not want to delay my graduation. But
Mm,
looking back, I recognize that I have a whole life to work and I should have taken advantage of the opportunity to go experience other things. So that is a regret that I share with you.
yeah, so I had the opportunity to sort of chaperone a study abroad program at Penn State, and like seeing some of the experiences that those students had, I just had, oh man, I had so much regret.
Well, at least
So
you're able
any
to
students
chaperone,
watching, definitely look into study abroad.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. And yeah, with chaperoning, at least you're able to expand, not in your college years, but still have some growth opportunities there. So that's good.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened after you graduated from Fresno State. Uh, what was it like applying to the master's and PhD programs? Like, can you share a little bit about that story?
Yeah, for sure. So at the point where I was getting ready to graduate from undergrad, at that point I was essentially all in on wanting to become a professor. I just, I'd had a lot of great professors at Fresno State, both in engineering and outside of engineering. And I was really inspired. I really wanted to, become an educator like them. So at that point, I also knew sort of research-wise the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. So I let that largely drive my decisions on where to apply for graduate school. So in STEM, especially, your success as a graduate student is really driven by your relationship with your advisor. Your advisor is going to be, hugely important in your success, and it really means a lot to find a good one. So that, yeah, drove a lot of my decisions and my decision making behind which graduate school I chose.
So, and then obviously you still use your major today. And has the pandemic impacted the way that, you do your work? How has that been?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. I know that's a terribly informative answer. So it's been interesting because I think it has encouraged a lot of people in higher education to take a step back that we haven't had to recently and really think about what types of value we are creating in the educational experiences that we use, right? So if we're doing in-class activities versus lecture, homework assignments versus exams versus projects, right? What are the unique value that's being provided by each one of those, right? And when we went virtual, it was really hard to do hands-on projects anymore, right? So I think that's what really kicked off this process for me because I was feeling what I was missing, right? Without the ability to do these projects. But at the same time, there was a point about halfway through the spring semester of 2020 where I was, giving a typical lecture, and I'm like, there's no reason I need to be sitting here talking to people through Zoom, right? It would probably be more convenient for everybody if this was just recorded, right? So within higher education, broadly speaking, people have been reflecting a lot about how we teach, what it means to students, and how we can really deliver the best experience possible for students.
So with that, what do you think, how are you envisioning your new normal then in terms of how you lead classes?
I'm still figuring that out. I think that one of the best things we can do for students is provide detailed feedback, right? rather than just, grading assignments and writing down numbers. I think there's so much to be said for, more detailed feedback and also encouragement, right? A more personalized touch. So I'm trying to figure out creative ways to rebalance my classes to make sure that I have a little more time to give that detailed feedback without sacrificing any of the other stuff that was already in those courses. Also, as we come back to being in person, I think that, hands-on learning is just so immensely important, right? Especially in what I teach, design. Engaging with people, asking them questions, figuring out their needs, so that can drive your design of a solution is so important. And it's one of those things that was so much harder during the pandemic.
Yeah, I heard an Albert Einstein quote that said if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend the first 55 minutes defining the problem itself, right? So yeah, to teach your students the importance of really thinking through what the issue is and not, kind of the surface level, because while we oftentimes dismiss things as being something, it's usually, more of a root cause that needs to be addressed rather than the symptom that we see.
Absolutely. My favorite example of that is elevators, right? So, if you say that the problem is, oh, elevator rides take too long, right? There are lots of ways that you could solve that. You could make the motors bigger. You could do something with like the routing algorithm. But what actually gets done is people install mirrors in elevators, because we all like to look at ourselves in mirrors, and they play music because it makes time to go by faster, at least the perception of time. So yeah, I totally agree. Like, problem framing is so important.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't know that's the reason why they have the mirrors in elevators, and yeah, because people are oftentimes adjusting themselves. Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about where you are in life now, and yeah, I mean, what would you like to share in terms of, because I mean, obviously you're living on the East Coast, and yeah, so how has that adjustment been?
Yeah, I'm still a little scared of winter. So I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania now. We get all four seasons out here, including lots and lots of snow during the winter. So I guess I'm more or less acclimated to that. At this point, I've been in Pennsylvania for about 10 years. It's a different culture. I think Pittsburgh is really unique. It's not quite East Coast. It's not really a Great Lakes city. It's not really a Midwest city. It's sort of its own unique Rust Belty flavor. And I mean, I definitely cannot call myself a Pittsburgh native, but I've really come to enjoy Pittsburgh. For the same reason I loved growing up in Pinehurst, and for the same reason I came to same reason I came to Fresno State. It feels homey, right? There are these tight-knit communities across Pittsburgh. So they call them neighborhoods. There's something like 50 neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. And the history of these neighborhoods is that they all used to be small towns, right? And as they grew up, it sort of grew into this metropolitan area. So every community still has that small town feel, and there's very much like a community identity.
Good. So what kind of hobbies have you acquired, or what's keeping you busy these days?
Yeah, so I do a lot of yoga these days. And we also just adopted a new dog. So she's about a year old. We've had her for 2 months, and she is crazy. She had no manners when we adopted her at first, and she's slowly learning them. So yeah, probably right now the thing keeping me the most busy is our dog.
And what breed is it?
She is a mutt. Everybody we talk to thinks she's something different. She is like Australian Shepherd shaped, but she has Rottweiler coloring. So she's just a funky looking dog.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yes, the dogs will keep one busy.
There you go. That's for sure. We also have 3 cats. they're much less needy. We've had all three of them for a while. So yeah, most of the time is towards the dog now.
And so, how long ago did you say you got your dog?
Oh, 2 months.
Okay, so a lot of people acquired a dog during the global shutdown, but you actually waited a little bit and
Yeah. Well, I mean, given the fact that this dog's a year old, we're pretty sure that her first owner sort of got her during the shutdown, right? And I don't know why she was put back up for adoption, right? If it was she was too high energy or what. Uh, but yeah, we're glad we got her now. Just because it's easier to take her out and do things, right?
and then let's talk about how now that you're about now remind me, did you graduate in 2012 or start in 2012?
I graduated in 2012.
So now that you're a decade out,
Oh my gosh, you're right.
yeah, how do you define success? And is that different from what you would have defined it as a decade ago?
So I would define success as it's a good question. I would define success as helping others identify and realize their visions. I think that, yeah, of course, where I come at that, the angle that I come at it from is from engineering and research, right? So in working with my graduate students, I really want to get to know them on a personal basis and understand what their goals are and what their vision is for their career, and then figure out the research and the project that they should be working on in order to help that vision come to life. Same thing in the courses that I teach, right? I want to get to know my students. I wanted to tailor my course content in order to better serve them. As an educator, I mean, I'm fundamentally in a service industry, right? So it's important to understand who our customers are. I think that definition of success is pretty different from what I had when I was, initially starting out in civil engineering. I think that initially my definition of success was, it was aligned with my reasons for getting into civil engineering, building big things, having a big impact on the world. I think the building big things has taken, a side seat, but I think having a big effect on the world for me now is through, these people who I help grow and learn, and then what they're going to be going out and doing, right? It's been really exciting to have my first few Ph.D. students defend their dissertations and go out in the world. And now I've got, a couple of new college professors in the family tree. I've got a new senior research scientist, and I'm just so excited to see what they do.
That is awesome. And I think that's true for a lot of people where, early on we view success as achievements and titles. And then once we're living it, we realize that it's more about, giving other people opportunities and helping them achieve their potential.
So true.
But it takes a bit of wisdom to realize that.
Well, ask me again in 10 years. I'll probably have a different answer.
Or it'll be a bigger impact, right? I think you'll be a brand, right? Like someone who you mentored to become a professor will have, successfully mentored someone else. Yes. So through this, I'm sure you experience stressful times. How do you best handle that stress? Or what habits have you developed?
And yoga is helpful. Having dogs and cats is also very helpful. I mean, more recently, going through the pandemic, I mean, that was a hard time for lots of people, right? I think I was, luckier than most, but, mentally it was still a very challenging time. And two of the best habits that I adopted during that time were going to my doctor and getting started on medication, and also getting started with a therapist. And I also regret not doing those things sooner. So maybe that's my third answer to your earlier question. Uh, but point being, stress can be addressed in lots of different ways. I found a few that I can do that work for me. But I also realized that reaching out for help to get support in dealing with stress and anxiety is a very effective strategy also.
Yeah, and I'm similar. I made sure to designate my primary care physician because my previous one had passed, and I just never took the time to get another primary care physician. But with the risk of getting COVID, I wanted to make sure that I had a doctor who I could call. So yeah, I established that relationship. And then I also started to see a therapist on a regular basis during the time period. And to your point, in my experiences, for most of us, that time just really stripped away all of the, whether it be distractions or the other activities we had in our lives, and just kind of left us in this state where we were all very vulnerable. So, and then to manage that and process that vulnerability was an important thing for, I think, a lot of us to have an outlet to do.
Totally. Yeah. And one of the analogies that I like the best about therapy is that it's kind of like brushing your teeth, right? It's maintenance. It's just the type of maintenance that not many of us have thought about before.
So let's talk about, and I guess to abruptly transition, apologies there. But let's talk about because you've been out of the Honors College for a decade, but I understand you still are, engaged in the Honors College community. So can you share how you've given back to the program since graduating?
Yeah, I guess mostly it's been in donating to the Smittcamp Family Honors College. I have a recurring monthly donation, and I also donate for Days of Giving every year. For several years, I was also an application reader. That was super fun. And then a couple of times I've dropped off pizzas at the honors office. I'm not sure if that counts.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just unexpected giving, right? Giving of the fourth sort.
Yeah. And it probably feels really good in the moment because people are surprised by it. So that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing about, your background and then your time at Fresno State and then where you're at now. If you don't mind, we'll transition to some rapid fire questions.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So in respect to your college days, what was your favorite course?
Social psych.
And what professor was that?
That was Bob Levine.
And did you read The Psychology of Time?
Unfortunately.
Yes.
Sorry?
Did you read his book, The Psychology of Time? I assume?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
I still refer to that with some of my clients. So that is.
Yeah, I think I have it on my bookshelf back over there. Actually, so like when people ask me why I do the kind of research that I do, which is a lot of like design cognition, I think one of the corner posts is this social psychology course, because as a young engineer, it encouraged me to think deeply about people, and that's a theme that has been present through a lot of my career.
Yeah, which is important because that's at the core of what we're all doing. So it's great.
Yeah, I mean everything that we design, that we build, that we create, it's going to be there because a person probably wants it, right? It's inescapable. We all work for people.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, even people who own their own business ultimately have customers and vendors and other people that they work with. So no one lives in a silo.
Yeah.
Who was your favorite professor?
Dr. Honora Chapman.
Oh, for humanities.
For humanities, yeah.
Yeah. She started after I was a student there, but I met her when she was a director of the Honors College.
Yeah, she's great.
Yes.
No,
Great.
I'm sorry to all of my engineering professors. You're all close seconds.
There we go. Let's see. And then what was your favorite place to eat on campus and what did you order?
So we'll go slightly off campus. So Tacos Marquitos was my favorite place to get food, and I would always get a bulldog burrito.
What was in it?
I think it was mostly a steak burrito, a couple French fries, kind of like a California burrito, but just huge,
Nice. And you'd finish it like a good college student.
like a good college student, exactly.
Let's see. And anything you would have done differently? Oh, we talked
Oh,
about
yeah.
study abroad.
We've hit several of those.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Present day. What is something that your classmates would be surprised to hear you're doing now?
I think that some of them might be surprised to hear that I do yoga.
And then
Oh,
what's
and
the
that I have
most,
long hair.
yes, I saw that in a video on LinkedIn.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. But you must have it pulled back now. So,
Yeah, I have it pulled back now. I had my hair like a quarter-inch long throughout most of college.
got it. Yeah. Well, it's hot here, so you've got to keep it short. Although
Yeah, for
I
sure.
imagine it's humid hot during the summer for you now.
Yeah, it's a little nasty. Which is why I have it pulled back.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see. What is the most exciting thing in your life right now?
Teaching my dog random tricks. We've been teaching her to like jump into our arms to like carry her. And that's been very exciting. I've been knocked on my butt like more times than I can count. But the dog
I was going to say, based on the description you gave, I don't think this is a little dog we're talking about.
she's 50 pounds, 55 pounds. So she's, I don't know, she's small. By my standards.
There you go. And then what are you completely bored of?
I am really, really bored of, this is going to be very neat. I'm kind of bored of machine learning. I think machine learning, it's been hyped for a while at this point, and I think we need to get smarter about machine learning. I like to say that we're sort of at the age of like artisanal machine learning, where like everything is like a handcrafted solution. But I think we need to get to the engineering of machine learning, where it's a little less handcrafted, a little more automated. So yeah, I'm very bored of traditional machine learning right now.
I'm excited what will happen in that space then. Do you have any projects in that space where you're leading
Yeah,
effort?
so we're doing a lot with trying to engineer human AI collaborations. So trying to figure out what the right team structures and team interaction patterns are for supporting AI teammates or AI partners within your team. We also have a couple of projects that are looking at being able to predict how well machine learning will do for a given task before you actually train the machine learning algorithm on that task. So just looking at the data that you have available, trying to figure out essentially the return on investment that you'd get from a machine learning solution.
Interesting. And how long these research projects, what is the duration of them?
It varies a lot. So I'm on a project right now that had a 5-year period of performance. And I just wrapped up a project that had a 12-month period of performance. So it varies based on the sponsor and the funding agency.
Okay, very interesting. So stay tuned on that.
Yeah.
And then what book are you reading right now?
So I'm reading a book called Whistling Vivaldi, which is about stereotypes and stereotyping. It's by a guy named Claude Steele.
And what book have you read multiple times or gifted to others?
Whenever anybody asks me for a recommendation of a book that they should read, I always recommend a book called Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. It is a fantasy series, but it has a very unique system of magic. It's not like your Lord of the Rings or your Harry Potter. It's very unique and very like word-based and linguistic. And I love that book so much.
Oh, awesome. I'll have
So
to,
if you're into fantasy, actually, Earth's
yes. Yeah, have to check that out. And then what is one piece of advice you'd give to college students?
Yeah, so one of the pieces of advice that has helped me the most in my field in doing research was by one of my thesis advisors, a guy named Ken Katofsky. And I've forgotten the exact quote, but his advice was something like, all research is but a progress report. The idea there is that good research leads to more research, right? As you find out something new, there are usually more questions that come from that too. So it can be really tempting to be perfectionists when it comes to our research, when it comes to our work. But there's always going to be more research to do, right? There are always going to be other questions to answer. So trying to make things too final can be a little counterproductive. So yeah, all research is but a progress report.
That reminds me of I was admitted to the partnership of my firm this last January. And so we had thank you. Yeah, we had the new partner training, and our chief operating officer expressed that, really our careers are a series of fall summits because, it's so similar to research where you explore one thing and you think, okay, I've arrived, but then there's something else you see. And so it's just, continuing to climb and
I like that
progress.
series of false summits. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing I try to emphasize for my students and for myself is having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, right? And I guess that would be my other advice, maybe a little more general, is always be learning something. Even now, right? I think I'm getting pretty good at my job, but what I'm learning is how to do my job more efficiently, right? How to serve my students better. There's always something to be learned.
Agreed. Yeah, and that's lifelong learning, and I think that's what keeps us young. Ultimately, is that pursuit of that intellectual curiosity and being okay with being wrong, and just continuing to grow, which I think is much easier said than done, especially for probably a lot of the students in the honors college. I think there's probably a bit of perfectionism that runs through all of us, so it's important to transition our mindset and to be okay, and that knowing that failure is a part of success, and so we just have to keep getting back up and continuing to grow. So that's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
All right, Chris, well, that's all that I have for today. Anything else that you'd like to share before we log off?
Go Dogs.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Ashley.